Now let's take a look at B. In B, we've got a problem because it's not in the correct order. Remember, we're supposed to start out with the term with the highest number of x's first, so let's reorder this first. Let's start out with the 8x squared plus x minus 9. Let's take a look at B. Our A in B is 8. Our B in problem B here is a hidden 1. And our C here is negative 9. So A times C is 8 times negative 9 is, when I multiply that together, is negative 72. Now keep in mind, when I have a negative as my factor, that I should be multiplying two things together that add up to a positive one. So that means that they need to be side by side. One needs to be positive, one needs to be negative. Well, the two numbers that are side by side is a 9 and an 8 that give me 72. But I want the negative on the 8 because I want to get a positive one when I add them up. And a positive 9 plus a negative 8 does give me a positive 1. So what this lets me do is it lets me split up the middle term into both a 9x and a negative 8x. The first term, the 8x squared, will stay the same, and the negative 9 will stay the same. And so let's group now that we've got four terms. What do the first two have in common? Well, the first two have in common that they have a common factor of x. So factoring out an x will leave me with an 8x plus 9. And with the second two, I've got an 8x and a 9. But notice the only thing I see that's important is that there's a negative sign out in front of the 8x, which means I'm actually going to pull out a negative or a negative 1 from those last two terms, which will change that negative 8x into a positive 8x, and it will change the negative 9 into a positive 9. So let's see. I've got a common factor of 8x plus 9. That'll leave me with an 8x plus 9 times, let's see, an x minus 1. That's going to be left over. Again, because it's leftovers, it's going inside of its own set of parentheses, and that's my final answer. I've got an 8x plus 9 times an x minus 1. On the next one in C, we've got 12x squared plus 17x plus 5. And let's see, grouping, we can't do grouping yet until we do our AC. So let's take a look at our A, B, and C. So A times C is going to be 12 times 5, which is 60. So we'll need two factors of 60 that are going to add up to a positive 17. We just had them. It's a 12 and a 5. 12 added to 5 does give us the 17, so that is what we want to do. So let's see, that gives us a way to break down our positive 17x. It can break down into a positive 12x and a positive 5x. The 12x squared at the beginning will stay the same, and the positive 5 at the end will stay the same. And then I can factor by grouping. So what do the first two have in common? They're both divisible by 12, and they both have an x. So if I pull out a 12 and an x, I should have an x plus 1 left over. From the second two, pulling out, well, they're both divisible by 5, and I'm going to pull down my plus sign. Means I'm going to divide out of positive 5, which will also leave me with an x plus 1. Now I have my matching x plus 1, which is perfect. So I can pull out my matching x plus 1, parentheses and all, which will leave me with a new set of leftovers for another set of parentheses, which will be a 12x plus 5. So that leaves me with x plus 1 and 12x plus 5, and we are done. In problem D, we have 8x squared minus 14xy plus 3xy, or 3y squared. That is in the correct order because we're starting out with the most number of x's, 2 x's, then only 1 x in the next term, and no x's in the last term. So we are set up properly. We have an a of 8, a b of negative 14, and a c of 3. So let's do our AC off to the side here. On this one, I'm running out of room, so I'm going to do it down here. So our AC is 8 times 3, which is 24. So I need two factors of 24 that are going to add up to a negative 14, which is a negative 12 and a negative 2. So we've got our 8x squared minus, when we split up that middle term, the negative 14xy, we're going to split it up into a negative 12 and a negative 2. Because they had xy's, when we split them up, they'll have an xy, so a negative 12xy and a negative 2xy, and then added to a 3y squared. Okay, what do the first two have in common? Because now we can group that we have 4 terms. Well, they're both divisible by 4, and they both have an x. So if I pull out a 4 and an x, I'll be left with a 2x minus 3y. Then grouping the second two, notice the first term has a negative, so I'll be factoring out a negative. And the only other thing they both have is they both have a y. So if you factor out the negative and the y, that will leave me with just a 2x in the first piece. Be careful, you factored out a negative, which will turn this plus back into a minus. You'll still have a 3 and one of the two y's. Notice we do know that we pulled this out correctly because we do have a matching 2x minus 3y that we can now pull out as a greatest common factor. And the question is, what's left over is the 4x minus y in its own set of parentheses. And so we've got 2x minus